In 1977, I was in my fourth year of the Peace Corps volunteer. My site was in a dynamic community center in the small provincial capital of Pasto, 1 degree north of the equator and almost 9,000 feet up in the Andes in southwestern Colombia. The active volcano towering above it, along with a patchwork carpet of crops all around it, offered a breathtaking experience in more than one way. This part of the country boasts a deep tradition in handcrafted art, and I was fortunate enough to find myself engaged in helping to create handicraft cooperatives and assist other co-ops and craft groups to organize and find markets for their goods. One of my projects, 2 hours east of Pasto, was with the Kamsa tribe in Sibundoy, Putumayo. Dressed in long black, red, and white striped cloaks, rubber boots, and bowl cuts, here observing Palm Sunday by coincidence, they inhabit a small plain between the mountains and the jungle. The Kamsa's written language was expressed by symbols which they displayed in their weavings. The meanings of the symbols were seemingly lost with their elders who had passed away. My job was to help the co-op find markets for the woven bags, scarves, and belts, as well as their wooden ceremonial masks that they carved as caricatures of themselves. During my periodic visits, I explored the local tradition of healing with a tribal curandero, or shaman. I thought that if the admins in the Peace Corps office in Bogota determined that it was okay to hire a proctologist as our primary care physician, why not? My first visit to Don Miguel involved a checkup to find out what needed to be cured. After looking into my eyes, my ears, and my mouth, he was able to ascertain that I needed to be treated for a cube of gas, a bad spirit, and a few other maladies. My subsequent visits would presumably take care of all of them and more. I had several hikes from the small town of Sibundoy up the dirt path to his mud, wood, and straw, mostly windowless house for treatments over the course of a year. Humidity in the homes of the Kamsa was pretty dense. The moisture was permeated with wood smoke, fermented corn for the preparation of chicha, guinea pigs, and various unidentifiable sources. Often, a woman appeared in the corner weaving on a blackstrap loom. I would bring with me 2 bottles of aguardiente, a locally produced sugarcane and anise-based alcohol, think ouzo, as my payment for each of these pretty bizarre sessions. They would begin with Don Miguel and I sitting across from each other on a small wooden table between us. After filling a well-used small tin cup in front of him, he would start chanting, summoning the number of indigenous spirits along with a list of compulsory Catholic saints. He would then cross the cup and empty the contents. Then it was my turn. When the spirits were again summoned and my cup duly blessed, I too would empty the cup of aguardiente. And then the ceremony was ready to proceed. The visits would involve my sitting in a chair in my underwear in the middle of a sparsely furnished room. He would dance around me in circles, chanting and shooing away the undesirable spirits from me with a small frond while spitting at them with mists of aguardiente. With the spirits dispersed, I usually was sent away with some kind of concoction of a mystery vegetation to drink or apply to the bottom of my feet. Although I didn't buy into his diagnosis of what ailed me, I decided that if I was going to go through with all these ceremonies, I might as well follow whatever he prescribed. On one special visit, I decided to accept Don Miguel's offer to participate in a yahe ceremony. Jahe is an hallucinogenic, closely related to what is known as ayahuasca. I didn't consciously enter with a problem to solve, which I understood was the reason for taking it. For example, a tribal member would enter its induced trance in order to envision the location of cattle that was lost. So I made my way back up the path to Don Miguel's house. When I entered, he invited me to sit on a wooden bench on a dirt floor between two young members of the tribe. As electricity had not yet made its way up the hill, we sat in the early evening dimness. Don Miguel sat about 5 feet in front of us, I assumed to monitor the experience the three of us would have. He handed a small gourd filled of a bitter liquid to the young man sitting on my left. He drank some, then he passed it to me, and after taking my share, I passed it to my companion on the right. Almost immediately, the purgative nature of the elixir emphatically expressed itself as a simultaneous explosion of vomit that the three of us would spew into a shared wok-size bowl. This was immediately followed by sprints to the outhouse. Somehow, we were all able to find our way back to the bench. As soon as I settled back down, I witnessed a crystal clear image of a giant jaguar moving before me as if on a large movie theater screen. It was stalking its prey, ready to pounce. But instead of the flesh of a wild cat, it was in the form of a machine consisting of gears and other mechanical parts. I instantaneously knew what it represented: the USA. There was no interpretation, no good or bad, it just was. The image may have lasted 5 seconds or 5 hours. It was dark when I came out of the trance. I vaguely remember that a few kamsa led me back down the hill to my rooming house. When I woke up the next morning, I didn't know where I was. Then, in the far right corner of the room, I heard voices murmuring among themselves. I hesitantly looked over to the spot, and they became quiet. But then the voices immediately resumed their conversation in the far left corner of the room. When I looked over to that spot, they were again quiet. I started to panic. Then I remembered where I was, and the voices in the corners had ceased. Relieved, I picked up the book in my nightstand with the intention of reading a few pages before getting up. I put on my glasses, and when I looked down, the words were all blurred. In total exasperation, I admitted to myself that I finally went one step too far with this curandero character. He blinded me. I threw off my glasses, and by chance I looked down at the book, and I could see every letter more clearly than ever. In a heartbeat, I went from desperation to exhilaration. He cured my eyesight. However, it would gradually return to its usually impaired state over the course of several months. As far as the mechanical Jaguar goes, I was already going on twice the normal Peace Corps commitment, but I loved everything about my experience in Pasto, and I couldn't have dreamed of a more satisfying one back in the United States. I'll do everything that I can to continue, and I did. A year and a half later, I made one of my visits to a Panama hat co-op located in the village of Sandona, 1.5 hours on the other side of the volcano. Over the years, you can always find a Peace Corps volunteer living in the town, usually working with the Coffee Growers Association. As fog would roll across the mountains late every afternoon, closing the dangerous road back, I would always spend the night with the volunteer in residence. On this occasion, Bonnie, a recently arrived volunteer, offered me accommodation for the night. Over the following few months, I found more reasons for visiting the hat co-op, and Bonnie found more reasons to come to Pasto. I then invited a few Peace Corps volunteer friends to spend Easter weekend with me at my small farmhouse perched on the side of the volcano high above the city below. Bonnie was the only one to show up. We spent the first night gazing at the stars and doing some deep sharing. The next day, we spontaneously decided to take a trip to the Panama Canal Zone to get married. A few weeks later, we found ourselves in front of the Justice of the Peace with two of our Peace Corps friends as witnesses. On the way to the courthouse, we asked the taxi driver if he could operate a camera, and he became our photographer. We returned to Pasto as a married couple to a community-wide, first-of-its-kind potluck wedding celebration at the farm. Bonnie then left her job in Sandona that had barely begun and joined me at the farm and in the community center where she taught nutrition to the women in our co-ops. A few months later, with our German Shepherd Gracie, Bonnie and I moved back to town. Travel up and down the rutted dirt road on my Honda 90 with a metal flat passenger seat was not up for the task of carrying both of us with food and laundry. Besides, electricity and hot water were welcome luxuries that came with living in the city. 1 year later, we returned to the States with Jake, who's sitting right back there. There's Jake. And then he was our 3-month-old baby boy. Looking back, I see that the Jaguar most definitely was telling me to stay put. I had 7 incredible years in Colombia and was more than ready to embark on my next adventure. By the way, in 3 weeks, Bonnie and I, Bonnie is over there back there, we're going to be celebrating our 46th anniversary. And the adventure continues. Thank you.